Now, our secondary theme song.
I recognize that one too.
Yeah, I know. Our secondary theme song was this very enigmatic little clip, as you just heard, with the Grassy Knoll and Flying Place and all this other stuff. And it was sent to us originally by Chicago Eddie, but I didn't know the source of it.
Okay.
And what happened was we mentioned it on air, and 2 listeners came back and said this is where it's from. So it's tacked on to the end of that song, "A Vanishing Girl" by the Dukes of Stratosphere, which are better known as Ecstasy.
Dukes of Stratosphere.
Well, I mean, they did this whole kind of like psychedelic thing. And
how old is that song?
Not that old.
Okay.
I'm thinking mid-'80s.
All right.
You remember that one? No, yeah, see, I got you. At any rate, we are with Chris Pinto.
Happiness is the word.
Right, that's it. Chris Pinto is with us. We're talking about his present documentary and those yet to come. And Chris, pick up where we left off. You were talking about Nostradamus, which almost gets everybody excited, but you know.
Right.
Well, it was for part 3 in the series is right now slated to be on Antichrist and a history of this character from a biblical perspective, but also to explore the various theories that have been given over the last 2,000 years about who this person would be. It seems to be, I mean, it's such a topic of fascination. There have been, movies made of, the Omen movies that, some people still look to as being a potential avenue. There's Nostradamus' theories about this Antichrist figure and how there would be supposedly 3 Antichrists, and Napoleon was one and Hitler was another, and this third guy is supposed to have a blue turban and come somewhere from the east, and this kind of thing, which are not at all biblical prophecies. And so part of what we'll do is separate the occult representations or the occult prophecies from the biblical prophecies, but still to explain what they are and where they come from and so on, and try to avoid giving any specific representation of who we think the Antichrist will be, but rather show the predominant theories, probably the oldest of which is the idea that the Pope would be the Antichrist, which, in fact, there's a quote that Eric has in his book, Vatican Assassins, where Charles Haddon Spurgeon said, quote, "It is the bounden duty of every Christian to pray against Antichrist. And as to what Antichrist is, no sane man ought to raise a question. If it be not popery in the Church of Rome, there is nothing in the world that can be called by that name." And the people, especially the Christians who lived at that time, seem to have that kind of conviction that that person would be the Pope. But there are other theories as well. Part 4 in the series is slated to be on Mystery Babylon the Great, which is where we're going to unfold all of the information. I think you and I had talked about that, where we talk in Megiddo Part 1 a little bit about the Jesuit order, and in one of our first conversations, Viz, you sort of suggested that I let the Jesuits get off the hook.
Yeah.
And then, I came back and I said, no, I haven't let them get off the hook. I'm just waiting to unfold all the information on the Jesuit order, because there's so much of it, and I really think a whole video needs to be dedicated to that subject and the things that surround it. Part 5 in the series is on Israel and the Gathering of Nations, where we will talk about, what is the role of Israel in prophecy, and hopefully be able to find some discernment about Israel according to the flesh versus the Israel of God that Paul writes about in the book of Galatians, and what is the role of Israel in prophecy, and what are the predominant teachings there, and how all of this stuff ends up. According to the Bible, Armageddon is what happens when all the nations are gathered together against Jerusalem and Judah, and so we'll talk about that, and talk about everything happening in the Middle East, this roadmap to peace that President Bush. What is this kind of peace going to amount to? When they shall say peace and safety, as Paul said to the Thessalonians, and then talk about the role of terrorism and Islam, and this plan that seems to permeate the New Age movement and those who are involved in the occult. There is an ongoing theme to wipe out and to annihilate the Jews from off the face of the earth. They just, it's an uncanny thing to come across writers like Alice Bailey. I'm pretty sure Madame Blavatsky.
Mm-hmm. Madame B, yep.
And a lot of these guys just talk about the problem of the Jews. Is the way I think that's what was motivating Hitler, was because he was influenced by Blavatsky and also Aleister Crowley.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in the song Mr. Crowley, there's a little tidbit that Ozzy Osbourne sings. Ozzy sings Mr. Crowley, and he talks about, he's singing this homage to Aleister Crowley, and he sings at one point, he says, we're approaching a time that is drastic, standing with their backs to the wall. According to David Bay at Cutting Edge, that phrase, standing with their backs to the wall, is the phrase that Hitler used when he talked about the annihilation of the Jews. And I find it interesting that, in this homage to Aleister Crowley, that Ozzy Osbourne chose
mm-hmm.
that phrase in particular.
I would also add that Crowley was accessible to Winston Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we should not forget that Hitler was in communication with, have you ever heard of Meister Eckhart?
Oh, sure, Dietrich Eckhart?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, of the Tool Society.
There you go.
Who Trevor Ravenscroft writes about him in his book, The Spear of Destiny, where he, according to Ravenscroft, it was Eckhart who trained Hitler in the occult.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, no, there's also an anecdote. Take it for what it's worth, but I think it's interesting nevertheless, that the Nazi salute was given to Hitler at the behest of Eckhart for its black magic. And so as a result, Churchill went to Crowley and said, well, how can we combat this? And he gave him the V for victory sign.
Right.
So anyway, whether it's true or not, the thing is I think it illustrates rather properly the forces that are behind world leaders even back then.
Yeah, it's. I was familiar with Crowley's boast that he had given Churchill the V for victory sign. I've even got a photo
right.
of Crowley dressed up like Winston Churchill, whom he apparently used to imitate, and so on. And I know that Crowley was at one point hired by MI6, was he not?
That I don't know.
That I've read. Now, I don't have a lot of detail
mm-hmm.
on that, but he was at one point, he went to work for British MI6, which is kind of a bizarre little factoid.
Mm-hmm.
He also had a relationship with a guy, I think the guy was a Roman Catholic cardinal under the old Roman Catholic Church. There's something called the Old Catholic Church, and there was a guy named Montague Summers. Have you ever read about him?
No, I haven't.
Montague Summers was apparently he was heavily involved in the occult, and I even think things like vampirism and exorcism and whatnot. And he got into occultism, which, if you study Catholicism really lends itself to a lot of occultism. It
mm-hmm.
has its origins in the occult, and he apparently met with Crowley. I've read some articles on it, and it couldn't find as much information as I wanted to, but there was some interesting info. I was trying to figure out, back when I was reading Eric's book, and I actually wrote to Eric at one point, and I said, have you got, because Crowley is such an influential character
mm-hmm.
throughout the 20th century, and I was trying to find if there was some kind of a link between the Jesuit general of the Vatican and Aleister Crowley. Did they have any kind of contact? And that's where I came up with this Montague Summers, but I haven't
mm-hmm.
found any, other than that Crowley was a very high-ranking Mason, and Masonry seems to be subject to the Black Pope and so on.
Well, he fancied himself as the Beast. He called himself such.
Right.
And also, I have to laugh at this because can you imagine how crazy this is? As we know, Crowley is a black magic individual. There was another individual who he was scared of. And this individual belonged to let me see if I got this straight, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And that would be William Butler Yeats. So, you know that Yeats was involved in very strange imagery in his poetry. But I have to laugh because he was going to put a curse on Crowley, and Crowley actually was shaken by it. So if we know Crowley as what he is, can you imagine what he thought Yeats was?
Wow, that's interesting. Now, that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, and I mean, I have to admit, I like a lot of Yeats's poetry, but it's out there, and certainly he was a cult as well. So at any rate, anybody who shakes Crowley's boots, you know, I got to pay attention to, and it turned out to be none less than W.B. Yeats. Go on with the series though, and where we're headed with this.
Well, that's the last one, Part 5, Israel and the Gathering of Nations, which sort of takes us to. It's interesting because in Part 1 we set up the idea of this plan for 3 world wars and what is World War III going to be, and the idea that World War III is supposed to be, according to the plan set forth by Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini back in 1870-71, right around there.
Right.
The plan is that World War III would erupt between Israel and her Arab neighbors. So, if that's the case, the future should prove quite interesting. The things that are happening today are very fascinating, and there's a number of quotes, one in particular that we can talk about after the break.
All right, that's great, and yes, and we will continue this conversation. Also, can we delve a little bit more into the New Age?
I think one of the classic songs that you probably forgot to play from this guy is "You Broke My Heart."
No, yeah, you're right. I didn't forget it, and it's never going to see the light of day on this station. By the way, that was a song written by Freddie Neal that Nilsson did. He wrote "The Lord Must Live in New York." I guess "The Lord Must Be in New York City," and they did not want that to be the title track for the movie, and as a result, they gave him Neal's "Everybody's Talking at Me," and the rest, of course, is history, as we might be very shortly. You're listening to the Grassy Knoll on AM 1350 WDCF, AM 1400 WZHR. We have with us an interview Chris Pinto. And Chris, can we talk about how we can possibly order the DVD or the VHS from you?
Yes, we've got Megiddo, the March to Armageddon, and DVD and VHS. You can call our toll-free number. We have a toll-free number, 877-279-9422. That's 877-279-9422. Or you can visit our website at www.adullumfilms, that's ADULLAMFILMS, adullumfilms.org. And there we've got a mailing address. You can also order by credit card online if you like, or call the toll-free number, which is, again, 877-279-9422.
I was circumspect when Cephas Ministries asked me if I would be willing to preview your documentary. And as I had said to you, you know, I don't know where you're coming from, so let me see this thing first. And you were very gracious and said, okay, fair enough. And, of course, after that, I fell in love with it. I think it's extremely accurate. And whether you're a Christian or not, what Chris has laid out is a warning for all of us that the New World Order is not a phony thing. It is it's coming to a neighborhood near you, and we look at it to a certain extent also spiritually as the beginning of the satanic reign that it is foretold. And Chris, if you want to speak to that, fine, and then let's go on into what you're delving into with regard to the New Age.
Well, with the New Age, that's the New Age is when I was interviewing Carol Matriciana, who was at one point called the the foremost expert, if you will, on the occult in Great Britain, I think, back in the 70s or 80s. But I interviewed her, and she's going to be more in Part 2 than she was in Part 1. She just makes a brief appearance. But she talked about the difficulty in witnessing to New Agers, as opposed to somebody who is like an outright Satanist. And she said, sort of in a joking kind of manner, she said, you know what, I'll take witnessing to a Satanist any day. Because when you talk to a Satanist, you don't have to argue about whether or not...
The existence, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Satanists acknowledge that there is God. Satanists believe that Jesus is the Son of God. They just hate him and they reject him. That's what Satanism is. It's the rejection of God. And so you don't have to convince them that what they're doing is evil or wicked or wrong. They know that it's wrong. That's why they do it. But with a New Ager, you enter into this realm of sort of... it's not black and white. It's very gray. It's very murky. And goodness is just it's a state of mind. It's just whatever you think good is. You're the one who judges. You decide. There's no, one of the popular doctrines is there's no sin, there's no right and wrong, which of course doesn't make any sense if you follow the thinking to its logical conclusion. If there's, in a world where there's no right and wrong, well, you wouldn't have a prison system,
Mm-hmm.
If these people really believed there was no right and wrong, then, if you stole their car or you stole all the money out of their bank account or something, they would never complain about it. But clearly they believe that there is a difference between right and wrong. They just have their own standard for what that is or what that should be. And so the New Age is a very difficult thing to tackle. One of the people that I admire the most for his teaching on the New Age movement is Pastor Joe Schimmel, who appears briefly in Megiddo Part 1, and he'll be more so in Part 2. But he takes it, he traces the phrase, the new eon, okay, to Crowley, all right, in his Book of the Law, where Crowley wrote about bringing forth the new eon of Horus. And that's seems to be where, that's like as far back as he goes in terms of tracing that term, the New Age. And then he shows in his documentary and in his research how Crowley's program, because Crowley set out a program for bringing about this New Age, and he called for things like the propagation of free sex. He called for the propagation of sodomy and homosexuality, the importation of Eastern religions, okay, bringing those into the West, Hinduism and Buddhism and Yogiism and so on, that these things were all necessary. The propagation of drugs and alcohol, that people should be getting involved in drugs because drug use, pharmakia is the biblical, that's
right.
the Greek word for the biblical word witchcraft and sorcery, and pharmakia is the ancient practice of using drugs and hallucinogens to channel demonic spirits for the purpose of being empowered by these satanic powers. And this is a lot of what Crowley taught in his writings and so on. Then we show, at one point we will show, how a lot of the leaders for movements, guys like Harry Hay, who is the hero of the homosexual rights movement through the 50s and 60s and beyond, men like Robert Anton Wilson, who was the editor for Playboy magazine, and under Hugh Hefner, and Hugh Hefner, who was influenced by what is his name? Robert Kinsey, okay, or Dr. Kinsey.
Yeah, from the famous pollsters.
Right.
The Kinsey Report.
Yeah, Alfred Kinsey. Sorry, not Robert Kinsey. Mm-hmm. Alfred Kinsey, who was the doctor who did all the the human sexuality and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Did all of this.
The Kinsey Report. Yeah. Exactly,
Kinsey Report that changed a lot of the American ideology or the American view of sexual morality and so on. And Kinsey was saying, well, hey, it's only natural, and he conducted these experiments talking about, well, a certain percentage of the population is just naturally homosexual and so on. But anyway, Kinsey influenced Hugh Hefner. When Hugh Hefner read Kinsey's writings, that's part of what inspired him to start Playboy magazine. Guys like this, Kenneth Anger, the co-founder of the Church of Satan, all of these men, the thing that they had in common, along with Timothy Leary out of Harvard University, who propagated the drug movement, mm-hmm. along with the Beatles, who were largely responsible for bringing the Maharishi from India into America, and they wrote their book, Chant and Be Happy, and Eastern mysticism just exploded in American culture, largely because of the influence of the Beatles. All of these men were disciples of Aleister Crowley, okay? Mm-hmm. And it's believed that they were following his programs, and this is sort of Crowley's New Age movement, as it were, that has so greatly affected pop culture mm-hmm. In America and throughout the West in the 20th century.
Also, okay, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, so this is what we intend to do with our documentary on the New Age is to trace it to that satanic conclusion, which is where it rightly belongs. A lot of New Agers don't believe that what they're practicing in their New Age practices is demonic or satanic or evil or anything like that. They just believe it's all light and goodness, and they do not acknowledge that, according to the Bible, Satan transforms himself into an angel of light, And I believe that's nowhere more clearly seen than it is in the New Age movement. But go ahead, you were going to say something.
A couple things. One, Crowley does appear on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's
Lonely Hearts Club Band.
Well, hey, thank you. Help me out with that. And he's one of those figures in the back there.
Yeah.
Secondly, when you're talking about relativism,
along with Karl Marx, I'd like
W.C. Fields.
Yeah. Yeah, Karl. I think Karl was a setup too. The Rothschilds were talking to him.
And they were going to put Hitler on that album
Ooh.
as well.
Whoa.
And John Lennon pulled him off at the last minute because he thought it would be too controversial.
John did that, eh?
Yeah.
Also, you were talking about kind of like spiritual relativism with the New Age philosophy.
Right.
But that relativism also packaged as progressivism, or now, as we know it in public schools, constructivism, is the same thing that was purported by John Dewey, a flaming communist out of the University of Chicago. And, of course, that's where, there is no hard facts, there is no truth except whatever exists that day, and the child will construct. You know what I'm saying? I mean, there was an attack on both the morality and the education of the citizens of the United States. And Dewey definitely took that same tack into the public school system, and we're seeing that even as we speak today.
A lot of that, I think, I agree with you on that. It seems that a lot of that has come about because, and this is one of the things that we're going to talk about. Researchers like Dave Hunt talk about it. There's Dr. Kent Hovind, who speaks on this. He's a creation science evangelist guy who's got some great work out there and a lot of great research on it. But he talks about the influence of evolution and Darwin's evolutionary theory, which wasn't really Darwin's theory, but he's the guy who made it famous, or at least it was made famous under his name. But the idea that if evolution is true, then you don't have any, if we weren't created by a God who gave us commands for living, for our life and how we ought to obey toward him and toward each other, and if we've just evolved up through some natural process or whatever, then you cannot say that anything is categorically right or categorically wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And that has a lot to do with it. There's a great book from a guy named Vaughn Schatzer who writes on the history of American education. It's subtitled From Harvard Scholars to Worker Bees of the New World Order. And in it he talks about the origins of like the American education system with Harvard University.
Mm-hmm.
How the original motto at Harvard was, quote, truth for Christ and the church. Now, they've shortened it today. If you go to the Harvard website, you find that they've cut off, quote, for Christ and the church, and now it's just truth, veritas, is the new Harvard motto. But originally, it was a school that was built for the purpose of teaching godliness. I mean, part of it, there's part of a quote, let every scholar be plainly instructed and earnestly pressed to consider well the main end of his...
Chris Pinto is with us, and we're talking about the source, the focus of his series that is coming out. And Chris, when is that second part due out?
We're hoping to have it out by the end of July, early August. That's God willing, that's the plan.
Now, am I in this one?
Not this one's is, but am
I in the next
planning
one?
to get you in here.
Yeah.
Hopefully before we get to the end. That's part of the plan.
Thank you.
If you're willing.
Which end are we speaking about?
Well, the end.
The
end
time.
Well, you know the end.
The end of the series, sure.
The end of the series.
Absolutely. No, I was going to say before the time runs out on the planet Earth. And have you watched all these warnings and paranoid and neurotic rantings about us being bombarded by asteroids and Planet X is coming and all this other stuff? Have you seen this come by you at all?
I've seen, I don't know if there's been a recent report, I haven't seen it, but I've heard different things about, the Earth getting, whacked by an asteroid or some big rock or something like that. I know that there's a reference to a, isn't it? There's the fallen star Wormwood. What is it? Revelation 8. 10, the third angel sounded, there fell a great star from heaven, burning as though it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers and upon the fountains of waters. and the name of the star is called Wormwood. It says, and a third part of the waters became wormwood, and many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So there is some kind of, there is a prophetic foretelling of a star falling into the midst of the waters. I don't know that that's going to happen anytime soon.
No.
I mean,
it's bound to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, yours been impacted before.
But Chris, what we're saying also is there still has to be the satanic reign for a period of time. Am I right or wrong? I mean, when this occurs, it's going to be after the fact. Otherwise, you would not have what's prophesied, and that is the satanic reign.
It would seem that this one world order. I mean, a lot of the Book of Revelation is, I think, difficult to discern in terms of chronology. Some people think they've got it all figured out, and those are the people that I worry about the most. But the chronology set down in Revelation, that act seems to be in the midst of what is traditionally called the tribulation period, the last 7 years on planet Earth before Jesus Christ returns. I would think that what's got to happen before the official tribulation period kicks off is the world has to come together into a one-world order, and that man of sin, known as the Antichrist, would have to be revealed as the one-world ruler before those. And since those things have not yet come to pass, it doesn't seem like we're going to have necessarily,
The timing is not there for us to get all bent out of shape about this.
Right.
There are other things, and that is, of course, the encroachment of a satanic reign that's being disguised through governmental operations that are being controlled by, and I would call them the Illuminati, because it does have a spiritual element to it, and it is an overarching term. Are you comfortable with that term, Illuminati?
Well, sure. It's an historical term. That's part of what we tried to do in Megiddo Part 1 is to show that this stuff about the Illuminati is not just conspiracy wacko information. Men like George Washington wrote about the Illuminati, and I don't believe Washington was a wacko. A lot of early American fathers were writing against this movement, and they spoke about the movement. It's known. I mean, it was the Illuminati that fomented the French Revolution. It's just that they did it under a different name, and they continually seemed to change their identity. They were called the Jacobins in France. They became known as there was a Colombian lodge of the Illuminati that was founded in New York at one point, but then they became known as the Democratic clubs. They've changed their identity around. I believe that the Illuminati extends into what is the modern-day communist movement. And if people really understood the Illuminati and communism and what it really is, they could recognize its working here in America. That it's still at work today through organizations like the ACLU, that I've heard called, this is my favorite term, the American Communist Lawyers Union, which I believe is what it is, because those guys spend all of their time trying to carry out the atheist agenda in America, which is what Anacharsis Cloutz, who was Weissaup's guy during the French Revolution, was doing in France. It's what communism does. They some of the people who have lived in communist countries have talked about how when the communists first came in, they didn't teach communism. What they did is they taught evolution, because they want to remove the idea of God from the consciousness of the people. Even my grandfather suffered during World War II, suffered in a communist concentration camp, and he was at one point sent to anti-God school, where literally he's sent into a classroom where he's being taught that God does not really exist, and man evolved, and man is his own master, and he doesn't answer to a God, and all this other kind of stuff. And he, of course, having a faith in God, argued with them, which ultimately led to him being sent off to a gold mine, really a death camp, which, thank the Lord, he survived. But yeah, it's and that's what all of this stuff, I believe, pulling the Ten Commandments out of schools, out of courtrooms even, and trying to stamp out, even though Blackstone's commentaries on the laws, which you and I have talked about in the past, was used. Thomas Jefferson at one point made the comment that lawyers in America use Blackstone's commentaries like Muslims use the Quran. Okay? And so Blackstone's commentary, which has all of these references to the Bible in it, and Blackstone was very clearly convicted by the teachings of the Bible. And he considered that essential to understanding and comprehending the use of law in a society. And so Blackstone's commentaries were used until the 1930s. And that's what we were talking about this guy, Christopher Langdell, back in 1870 at Harvard University, developed the idea of evolutionary law. He believed that as man evolved, his laws must also evolve, which is where evolution comes into play. But now they've got the communist teachings of evolution going on in our school system. They're pulling God, they're forcing everything to conform to what looks like an atheist belief system, okay? So there can be supposedly no mention of religion. I was out meeting with the pastor of our church last night, and there was a Christian guy who was there who's right now taking a writing class at a local college here in California. And his writing instructor has given them this writing book that basically teaches occultic automatic writing as your system. How are you going to become a good writer? Practice automatic writing, okay? Out from the occult. And
right.
Go ahead.
No. Let me just inject this, because going back to William Butler Yeats, that was what he was a champion of and said was his forte, was that it was automatic writing, trance writing.
Wow.
So go ahead, go with the thought.
Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, all of these guys wrote their works based upon this automatic writing method, where they're encountering demonic spirits and channeling information through them. And the author of this book, that's called, the name of the book, it's called Writing Down the Bones, but it's like the textbook that they're using for this writing class. And in the book, the woman is, they're talking about her Zen meditation belief system, and her occult background and so on, and how she utilizes these things to teach writing methodology and so on. And this is being taught at the university. Meanwhile, there's another girl who goes to our church who is like a teacher's aide or an assistant. She's becoming a teacher. She talks about how in the present school system, if she were to share the gospel with one of her students as a teacher, probably lose her job and be ostracized and would be, banished from teaching, anywhere in the community. And yet, it's deemed perfectly acceptable for another teacher to hand out a book to his students where they're teaching Zen meditation and automatic writing.
You have a problem with that?
Well, there's a huge problem with it. It's the great deception that it's why I agree with Richard Wurmbrand in his book on Marx and Satan. He makes the comment that, look, Marx and his followers, they were not atheists, as modern-day atheists claim to be. These were men who hated God. They worshipped Satan. Okay, they were Satanists, and they used atheism as a tool or an instrument to make war against the Almighty, to make war against the God of the Bible. And I believe that's what's happening here in America today.
Well, there's no doubt. There's no doubt about it. And I want to revisit that, if you will, because it's in the schools today where our children are being prepared to be global citizens. And with that comes a lot of baggage that I don't think is necessarily good. And let's talk also, when we come back, if we could, about the supposed collapse of communism. Okay, Chris?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Chris Pinto, Megiddo, The March to Armageddon, great film, and everybody should see it regardless of your religious pursuits. This is the Grassy Knoll. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. We're with Chris Pinto, and Chris, again, can you please give our listeners ordering information for the DVD, VHS, Megiddo, The March to Armageddon?
Sure, you can order Megiddo on VHS or DVD for $19.95. You can call us toll free at 877-279-9422. That's 877-279-9422. Or you can visit our website at www.adullamfilms, that's ADULLAMFILMS, adullamfilms.org. And order Megiddo. We take credit cards. You can also find on our website for those who, we have a number of people who like to send in checks and so on. It's $19.95 plus $4.50 shipping and handling, $24.45 total, and we've got a mailing address on our website as well.
Okay, and Chris, we would like people to mail in checks to us too, just because. So far, it's not worked out. Harry's tried, but
his box, what?
Yeah, I know. No, two things. One, let me ask you this: are you familiar with Constant Cumby's work, The Dangers of the New World? What was that? The Dangers of the Rainbow, I believe. Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, was it Children of the Rainbow or something like that?
Well, does Cumby ring a bell at all?
Cumby rings a bell, but I cannot tell you that Constance Cumby. I've seen the name mentioned,
okay,
a number of times, but I couldn't tell you specifically.
Well, we
what,
heard
what
that
he teaches. Go ahead.
No, we heard that back in '83, and of course, now remember, I'm not thinking about New World Order or anything else. '83, when Lady Biz and I were courting. And
Sparking.
She says courting. I'll go with that. Also, I mean, a lot of people shook their heads, and their belief system was rocked. And I never forgot it. In fact, I've even thought about trying to get her back on, if it's possible. She's a lawyer, I think, out of Detroit. But what she laid out was pretty powerful, and I never really heard anything except, one other thing, and you can address this, please. Are you familiar with Francis Schaeffer?
I know the name, but
okay.
Again, is another one of those I've heard the name, but I couldn't tell you.
Well, he came out with a book, and then he also came out with a film series called How Then Should We Live? And in it, he's talking about doing things like dumbing down the water supply, and we're like, what is this about? And then come to find out, my goodness, what is fluoride? You know what I'm saying? So, I mean...
it's an effective dental preventative.
Yeah, right. Chris, what happened once... I think you might be familiar with the urban legend about Kennedy making a speech up in Columbia within 2 weeks of his death,
right,
in which he warns about the New World Order. It did not happen, okay? But anyway,
right.
I went into the New York Times, and I researched October and November of 1963 to see if I can find that, because I had to know. But what I came upon, Chris, was that here's this big block ad put into the New York Times by a consortium of New York doctors saying, do not fluoridate. It is mass medication. Now, can you imagine that at that time?
Wow. And
I mean, fluoride, obviously, is a waste product of the aluminum manufacturing and is definitely, it's also part of pesticides, rat poison.
Part of the recycling effort in our country,
yes.
Actually, if you think about it. But you can buy Dannon's with fluoride in it now.
Yeah, and pay more for it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I looked at these people. I'm saying, well, I'm bearing witness with them, but that's kind of, steep. And then you do a little research and you find out, you know what? They're right. So going back to the New Age effort then, and as we were saying about communism, did it really die? Why don't you give us your take about where that's at?
I think it's, communism is, it's why I was talking about earlier, and in doing the research behind this whole, going back to Weishaupt and the Illuminati and just his principles, the idea of abolishing private property, the idea of, totally tearing down, using this step-by-step system wherein you begin by embracing Christianity, then you move your congregation from Christianity into deism, from deism into atheism, and then from atheism it's outright Satanism that follows. And understanding the progression of the Illuminati into Jacobinism and then into communism has helped me to understand what these guys are doing and their methodology and what they're ultimately trying to achieve. And so communism is not just the government of like the Soviet Union
right.
or China or North Korea. I mean, that's just the natural, I guess, they became a government at some point, but that's not completely the movement. The movement, I think, is much more spiritual, and it's sort of a spiritual modus operandi for bringing about this world revolution that writers like Nesta Webster talked about in her histories of this whole, conspiracy thing that's going on. And so communism, I think we can see communism at work in America today. It's not dead. There are still organizations that still call themselves communist organizations here in America. There's still people who profess communism. I was at a restaurant several weeks ago overhearing somebody talk about their parents and saying, well, my parents, they tend to be, strong Democrats and sometimes just outright communists, that their views are outright communist. I was so shocked by it. I couldn't believe somebody actually said that their parents are communists.
To support the fact that communism is far from dead, your assertion there is I was looking in the St. Petersburg Times the other day.
Of Florida.
And which there is a St. Pete Times, you're right.
Yeah.
At any rate, the front cover had communist party members in Baghdad celebrating the sovereignty because under the 30 years of Saddam Hussein, their party was banned. So then you got to scratch your head and wonder who's really the bad guy here.
Wow.
Well, the thing is, socialism, communism, Marxism, it may be a continuum, but the thing is, it's all the same. And that is the state reigns and the individual is reduced to whatever value he or she has to the state. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's, children become the property of the state.
Right.
There are even laws in the Soviet Union under Stalin that talked about how a woman doesn't, if a woman gets raped, it's wrong for her to suggest that she was raped because she is not her own property. She is the property of the state. And so the idea of her declaring that she was raped shows a kind of selfish identity.
Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean?
How dare you take it personally, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of the abolishment of any kind of self-identity, which is, I don't believe at all what God calls us to through the Bible. God, who created us, gave each one of us our own unique fingerprint.
Right.
And so it's very clear that our Creator has a very specific path for each and every one of us. Communism is more like it seems more like a Borg kind of thing. You will be assimilated into the whole. You will abandon your identity, and you will simply obey. You'll become a worker bee and obey what the queens tell you to do.
There is a book by a Soviet defector who was high up in the military called "Old Lies for New." And he stated, look, communism didn't die. To us, there's documentation, Chris, that Rockefeller, Schiff, Warburg, and them financed the Bolshevik Revolution, and Dr. Stanley Monteith in his books cited works that said, by all means, we created communism, almost like in the Hegelian dialectic of bad guy, good guy.
Right.
But I think it might have been a laboratory for the Soviet Union. Now they've downsized, wisely so, for economic purposes. We call it a collapse, and it wasn't. And I think what we're going to see now is, of course, global totalitarianism, which is also Marxism or communism, whatever you want to say. But that did not die, and it's very much with us, even in the United States.
And as I've discussed, I think it's going to come out of here. A lot of people keep pointing to all these other countries. I think that the breeding ground for all those things is right here in the United States.
Chris, we have another minute. Your last thoughts and how about some ordering information?
Well, I want to agree with that statement that it's coming, quite possibly going to come right out of the United States. But we see so much of it's just happening in a slower, more steady fashion than we saw in the Russian Revolution or in the French Revolution. But it's happening in a step-by-step manner, and so we're continually hearing what the Jacobins were doing in a matter of days. The ACLU and all the organizations that support them are doing over a period of years and decades and so on. where, I mean, especially from the 1960s, there are a lot of people who point to that marker, where when prayer was pulled out of schools, a lot of the biblical laws that were set forth for our society and our school system, as soon as those things were removed, there was this outbreak of social chaos. I've read statistics to the effect that, rapes among young people, young men committing rape has gone up like 500%. These shocking statistics, teen suicide, teen pregnancies, illegitimate children being born, all manner of immorality has just exploded from that time. As soon as a lot of those boundaries were removed, and children were being taught that, well, you're just a more highly evolved animal,
right?
And
the incrementalism that you spoke about is famously known as Fabian socialism, where you do it nonviolently, a little bit at a time, no matter how long it takes. We got to jump. We're not going to play outro music, but I would like you one more time, if you would, to give ordering information for Megiddo, the March to Armageddon.
You can call our toll-free number at 877-279-9422. That's 877-279-9422. Or you can visit our website at Adullam Films. That's www.adullam, ADULLAM, films, FILMS.org. The way to remember Adullam is 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 1. David escaped to the cave Adullam.
Okay, I'm not going to, like I said, go out with this. We're going to go right into another show that follows. It's called Apostasy Revealed, which is supported by Cephas Ministries. We want to thank you for being with us. I think we have more to talk about, and if you wouldn't mind, can we do this again?
I would love to do it again.
And can I be in part 4 or 5 or something?
Oh, God willing, I'm gonna shoot for that. We're gonna work it out. We're gonna get you in front of a camera, and you're gonna talk to me like Eric Phelps for 3 hours.
Way to sidestep around it. All right, listen. Thank you very much. Have a real great and safe weekend. Okay.
All right, you too. Happy 4th of July, guys.
Dependence Day. Yes.
Oh, that's right.
God bless.
Okay.
And good night.
All right. Good night.